time of the hour of the phoenix, as those poets that I was talking about. And in his music, he was even feeling more stronger and earlier than those people, the changes and the dramatic story of the situation. And another, he was born in Taurus, Earth, and his ability to work was unimaginable. He was one of the most productive. No, but working, not productive. He was like a work alcoholist. He was working.
Obsession.
Obsession. He was working each day a lot of hours. And he.
You know that, Olga?
First of all, you remember I told you about Pythagoras, that his parents had a premonition. I told you about the Prince Henry and about the prophet Samuel. And he was also born in the hour of the phoenix. And we know from his autobiography and from his diaries that he knew that he was something special and he is going to be famous in this world. And that was the reason to conduct his diaries from the very early age of 12 about. And he was putting his list of diaries every day for more than 40 years. And there are people, when they are writing their diaries, somebody is writing about travels, like Anderson, somebody about their love experience. Other people, like Faraday, had his diary only about his experience, nothing more. So you cannot learn a lot of things, different things, about narrative of life due to these biographies. Prokofiev was born at the time of the poets. So he was also a bit of a poet. His language was very poetic, and he was very literary person. He wrote his librettos mostly by himself, good librettos, and he knew that he is conducting his diaries for the future generations. So he wrote it in many different fields of life. Love and thoughts and performances and funds. He was born in Earth element of Taurus, and he could be his own fund, how will you say it, economist, okay? Everything you can know, his relationship, everything was there. So he was a very interesting person for diaries, and his diaries were published in 2002. He knew to bring them to United States and to give permission only to his family, to his children, to publish it when they will find it possible to do. So he saved his diaries from the USSR persecutions. And we can learn from his diaries about all the 4 topics that I was talking about them previously, including prenatal. Were there any other examples in history? I was presenting this lecture about Prokofiev last year in Sozopol in Bulgaria in the meteorology symposium. And then I found out, coincidentally, that the same Ibn Ezra, Abraham Ibn Ezra that I told you, was believed to have a diary when he wrote about each day of his 75 years life. And there was one rabbi in Bulgaria who was just 200 years after Abraham Ibn Ezra. He found those diaries, and he was the only person in the world who read them. And he put it down. You know, when you read those diaries, you can find all the universal rhythms, planetary cycles in those diaries. Then you will find the meaning of each stage in your life. Those diaries are giving us a picture how a person analyzing himself can find out the universal laws of time. You know, we don't have this Abraham Ibn Ezra diaries. They are lost now. And I cannot tell you whether it's truth or not truth. But I can tell you that Prokofiev's diaries are real. And they are not as complete, not all his life, 63 years old, but 40 years from his life we can cover, and we can find those cycles and those elements presented in his birth point. So why Prokofiev? On one hand, his greatest friend, Sergei Eisenstein, one of the greatest film directors, wrote about him, Prokofiev works like a clock. It was very important for writing music for cinema. And John helped me to edit my paper about Phoenix-born people, composers in music. And it appears also there about Prokofiev, and you are invited to read it. And there is a very interesting story, because two celestial twins, Irving Berlin and Marx Steiner, came, one from Austria, the second from Russia, to America. They were celestial twins, and they were the fathers, in parallel, of the synchronical adjustment of the audio musical waves to the video pictures. So they are the fathers of our cinema music. While Prokofiev, born, and they were also celestial twins, born in the hour of the Phoenix. Okay? Prokofiev was not their celestial twin, but he was born, Phoenix-born, and he was the first classical composer of that statue, who became also one of the fathers of the cinema music. And his ability to pinpoint each and every second in his music gave him an ability to write Alexander Nevsky, Ivan Grozny. Those films were very popular in their time, and they are now serving as a teaching material all over the world to teach the composers for cinema. Because he was working like a clock. Another reason that Ilya Ehrenburg, one of the heroes of my Celestial Twins book, and also one of the most famous biographers in the world and writers, who also was born the same year as Prokofiev, he wrote about him. The future generations will not be able to understand that difficult and glorious time, which we still have the right to call our own, without pondering over Prokofiev's remarkable life. It was really a very interesting life. So I wrote a book about him, which is called Opera Prkfv. It is his signature, Prkfv, W. Not knowing Hebrew, he used, as it is in Hebrew, only consonants without vowels in writing his diaries. It was as if he was writing in Hebrew, because it was a way to do it more quicker. So he invented it by himself. And now I would like a moment of musical moment, and one of his most famous things, it is a march of 3 oranges, yes, Love to 3 Oranges, played by Prokofiev himself. hear a lot of rhythms, different rhythms, very frequent and very slow, and the drama and the changes. And he was looking for water, because 3 oranges were 30 for water. He hadn't enough emotions. When I have chosen him a word about his prenatal history, and for Maria it may be very interesting, and for most of us, those were the times when in Russia, for example, and he was born in a small village. It was far from the capitals. So, you know, about 80 to 90% of babies were dying before reaching the age of 1 or 2. So his mother and father, although they were very educated and very intellectual people, had lost their 2 girls. One was 9 months old, and the second was just a little less than 2 years old. So he was the 3rd and the last child in this family, and you may think which kind of fear experienced his mother giving him birth. And the fear was so strong those days. They looked for each possibility to prevent the next catastrophe. And she decided, somebody told her, you know, your daughters died because of teething, and maybe it is because of your breast milk. So do not feed that child with this breast. Give it to a nursing lady, and you won't be in trouble. And what happened? The 3rd week of his life, he almost died from very strong reactions. But he survived with this lady. But when he was already a person who wrote his autobiography in his 40s, he wrote, you know, my nursing lady, she was from the village, and she had her son, whom she hated. And she really was sadistic toward her own baby. So, asked Prokofiev, maybe this was the reason that with her breast milk I had my cruelty, because she was so cruel. So there were many things to mention about this situation. The second thing was then when his mother decided, when he was 8 months old, she decided that in winter it is too boring to stay in the village. And she was a pianist also, playing very beautiful in piano, and her love was to stay in Moscow or in St. Petersburg for 2 months each winter during the theatrical season. So when he was about 8 months old, she told him farewell, and she went to Moscow and St. Petersburg for 2 months. And the question is, you know, the mother who wanted her child, was she afraid that he will die, so she shouldn't present when he is dying? Or maybe she didn't think that it is important. Anyway, when she came back, he was already talking. He was 1 year old, and he began to talk fluently very early. And he remembered that sometimes he had very strong feelings of rejection to his mother. But otherwise he was a very, very loyal son, loving not, but loyal son. So this biographical case began to interest me because of those diaries and autobiography. And it is already published in Russian in Israel. We can here follow, after the very interesting dynamics of the changing periods in our lives. When we regard the planets as the natural reference clocks, we can number the number of crossings of the planets when they are crossing our birth point. Here, Sun was at the moment of birth of Prokofiev in Taurus. At the same time, Pluto and Neptune went in conjunction in the airy sign of Gemini. It was the hour of Phoenix, or Phoenix hour. And Uranus, also a very slow planet, was in Libra. Those planets are moving very, very slowly. So they will never during his life reach this starting point of birth point, BP. Okay? It is less than one cycle, less than 1 year. But other fast-moving planets Sun will do 62 years of his life, so he will have 62 celebrations of his birthday. And you know, when you have celebration, the Sun is back, we celebrate. That's a special day for life, and we want to celebrate it again, and we saw it in Cinderella, okay, in his music. But Mars, he loved Mars. He was really very, very fond of this planet, which was in conjunction with Pluto and Neptune. 3 planets stood in the same position. Mars made 32 times came around this Sun BP point. 32 Mars cycles in his life. Jupiter had done completed 5 years. Jupiter period is 12 years, okay? So it completed 5 full years of Jupiter in his life. Usually in astrology, when they think about transits, it's called transit, when the planet today is on the same position on the eclipse when the Sun, for example, or other planet in your natal day, okay? In astrology, they look for long period cycles, but to follow after such quick transits as Mars, when Mars in this point stays for about 3 weeks for each 2 years, but it stays there 3 weeks. So you have to have diaries and to follow after them to check whether something special was in the ebbs or flows of our activity, for example. And you cannot do it. You can have it by your premonition, but you don't know how to measure it, okay? In case of Prokofiev, it was possible because he was very addicted to his diaries. And we check whether it was something really unusual in those days when his activities should be, according to our knowledge, more potent. Indeed, all the biographers of Prokofiev, and there are many of them, divide his life into 5 periods, each 12 years. And what a wonder, each period is exactly when Jupiter was coming again to the birth point of Prokofiev. So his signature was PRKFV. So I tried to adjust each Jupiter year to each letter in his signature. So his first one, P, was premonition. P, premonition. So from 1 year old, the first transit was when he was 1 year old. He began to talk that time fluently. To the 13, he was staying in his village, now it's Ukraine, in the region of Lugansk. And he was brought by his mother. She was playing piano when he was in her womb. And he inherited her good, excellent musical taste in her womb. And until 12 years old, she was the most important teacher in music. Okay. Then Jupiter comes the second time. It's 1904. Everything is changing on the change. A new era. He is leaving his village, and he said, I don't want to be here. And 13 years old, he's taken to St. Petersburg, and it's his age of rainbow hopes, because he is already known as a talented student in the northern capital of the Russia Empire. And this is full of his hopes, and I forgot to tell you, just a moment. Each period there was at least one leading opera. And his first opera, named Giant, on his own libretto, was written when he was 9 years old. 8 years old, he knew that he will be famous composer. And it is an excellent opera. For example, Mozart wrote his first opera 11 years old. And 8 years old, in libretto, there were things unimaginable, because he predicted that he wouldn't be able to help his cousins. They will be killed by Stalin, and that he won't be able to save his wife from Stalin. It was a premonition. It was unbelievable how the child could know something such special. The second opera was written by a professional poet, poetess, and has chosen for him Undine's story. Yes, Undine's story. The story of water spirits who asks from the boys, musical boys, to give her their soul with their music. So he really became addicted to the story of his composing. The third period, from 1916 to 28, key developments in his life. He left Russia. There was a revolution, as you know. Everything changed. His father died. Nothing remained. He left Russia for something unknown. He didn't speak English, but he went to America. And then he went to Germany and France. He became something, wonder agent abroad, knowing nothing about his further development, but he has written a very interesting opera, Gambler, by Dostoevsky. And it is believed to be a first opera, a libretto was his own, first opera to introduce a psychological drama element and to use music as something, as a hero in the opera itself. And from 28 to 40s, it was his coming back. He wrote at that time Prodigal Son, the ballet, and he thought that he has to come back. It's very difficult to decide why. It was predicted by his chart, but he couldn't understand it why. Nevertheless, he has chosen his way, and the transitional period was between 28 to 40. He took his family, his wife, and 2 of his sons, and came to Moscow. And in 1940, the wall or the border was closed, and he couldn't anymore anytime leave the USSR. Not only that, from 40 to 52, this is his last period, which I called verdict, victory or victim. Because, in the Western world, they write in biographies that he became from a revolutionary composer to a serf, Stalin's serf. But in Russia, they say, okay, he did what he could, and he wrote his famous opera, War and Peace. You know, we are talking about 1940. Everything is changed in his life from the very fundament. He leaves his wife with the children. He has his second wife. He runs away from Moscow, and then, before the Second World War, but in the beginning of the 41, he knows about the war. So he is in exile in Asia, in Georgia, in Uzbekistan. He is wandering in the borders of the USSR, but he is in exile in his own country. And this is a very strange period in his life, and everybody can decide by himself whether it was his victory or he was really lost in those times. This is about Jupiter, but 32 cycles of Mars are working like a clock in his life. Prokofiev, said Eisenstein, felt the heartbeat of time. During each Mars year, Prokofiev experienced recurring patterns of fluctuations in the level of activities. From Prokofiev's diaries, we learn that his time was not evenly flowing and had his topography and was not homogeneous. It was coordinated not with an arbitrary one-dimensional time axis, but rather with a complex hierarchic system of various planetary cycles, which I called previously time codons. So you see, he put it really, 5 days I wrote this one. Then for half a year, I couldn't write anything. Yes, I could put it down. I can work in many ways. I can be a performing pianist, but not a composer. And then suddenly, he said, in about half a year, everything is changing again. And once in 2 years, there are greatest peaks. And you can follow it, and I follow it. And it's unimaginable how really our work abilities are changing with the times. And for each educator, how important to understand our biological rhythms. For example, in music, Maria, you told me whether the truth. Many teachers say you have to play each day. If you don't exercise each day 6 hours, you are not a musician. And Prokofiev wrote, and you can look at the dates in his diaries. Okay, I was ill. He was really very ill in America, and he was ill for a few months until the next Mars came again. He didn't know that much, but he was really ill. And then he writes, oh, it's very strange. I couldn't play piano. I had no piano. But now I'm back, and I'm playing much better than it was previously. And I found it already earlier. Then there are periods when you have to have a complete stop, and then when you come back, you have another ebb. Okay? He knew it. So he was changing his activities. What a pity that Hemingway did not know it. Because when he was each time afraid, oh, I shouldn't be able to write anymore because now there is a desert in my writing, he believed that never again he would be able, because he is very old. Would he know from the beginning that there are cycles and the next ebb will be in 6 months or 2 years? Would he still commit suicide? And for many teachers, it's a really great task to listen to their pupils, to believe in their abilities, to have the inner clock and to follow it. So, as I already told you, different people played different roles in his life, and it's very interesting about his love relationships. His mother was a Capricorn, and his first love, Nina, was Capricorn, and he loved her dearly. But his mother was so against his marriage at all that after all this marriage was not consumed. And then he married Lina, his first wife, and many people say he was promiscuous, he had problems. No way, she was born when his moon was. He was born in air sign of Libra. He could communicate well with her. She was a performing singer, and she was very beautiful. She was wife with which you could go and present her as a composer wife. But from the beginning, he told her that he doesn't love her. She was pregnant, so he married her. But he wrote, I didn't want to marry her. And then when he came back to Russia, he met this Mira Mendelssohn Prokofiev, a young girl who was at that time exact copy of Nina, his first wife. Not wife, but his first love. And she was born in Capricorn, exactly as Nina. And he loved her. And she looked at him with such admiring eyes, and he at her as if she was the copy of his mother. She devoted her life only to him, without children. He was doing everything for him. He was a writer of his librettos. So he loved her. And from the point of view of his timing, it was an excellent time for him to find his love. In Russia, there is a casus Prokofiev, because he is a person with two wives. By marriage, how we call it. But, you know, we cannot judge him. When we look on biographies, he tried everything. The problem was that after all, his first wife and his only wife, Lina, was persecuted by Stalin. She was more than 10 years in Gulag in Siberia. She survived him, and she lived till about 90 years old. And she was also the mother of his two sons, and altogether they found the foundation, Prokofiev Foundations, and have published his diaries. So her mission, like an heir, to write about him, she did well.
His first wife?
Lina. Libra. So, we are already in the end. And what can I bring in the end? First of all, Psalm 90, written by Moses. Teach us to number our days, aright, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. At the first glance, the presentation based on different temporological studies might look as a set of various times made using different reference clocks, scales, and even logic. Yet to be understood in a coherent manner, it should be regarded as a whole. I hope that such a holistic approach will open a promising avenue of historical research and stimulate further exploration in this new and exciting field of biographical knowledge. Thomas Eliot wrote that in my end is my beginning. He was Phoenix-born poet, and I told you about long-term cycles. In the end of these presentations, I hope that people will gradually learn how to conceive their children in love, and then to deliver and nurture them with respect to their specific times timings, elements, needs, potentials, that we will welcome our children in our world. And Elliot was born in the Phoenix hour. Many thousands years before, the patriarch Abraham was born in the Phoenix hour. And he wrote the book of creation. Okay? And there it goes the other way. Their end embedded in their beginning, and their beginning in their end, like a flame bound to a burning ember. So, beginnings, end and beginnings, and we today came to the end of this presentation, but my hope is that will be the beginning of our common new knowledge and inquiry in these very fascinating visions and field. Thank you very much.
Science that we can delay any possible Alzheimer's by learning something new. And I feel my little gray cells have been saved a little bit from Alzheimer's. Thank you.
Why a little bit?
Your little gray cells.
Can I ask a technical question?
Everything.
One of the people you referred to was died in 1934, and he was claiming that there needed to be a new idea. I was born in 1934. Does anything connected with the ideas about prenatal, whole self prenatal psychology connected with his call for that?
Maybe. We are the first stage phase, and we are the next generation who should make it more scientifically. They got their premonitions, their poetical visions, and our task, as far as the Phoenix clock model sees it, is to develop them, to bring them to the knowledge of other people, and to check them, verify them, explore them, develop them. So yes.
So that's the period that whole self is in right now.
Maybe because Pluto and Neptune in the 1943 were the first year when Pluto and Neptune were exactly 60 degrees. So you are the representative of the very meaningful aspect. It is changing, but you know that was the point that it was exactly sextile. So.
Was that 1934?
1942, and then it comes a little bit, and then it goes away from the 60 degrees. It's all the time changing. But during 1940 to 42 to 1956, I don't remember exactly. It was almost exact 60 degrees. So you are strongly, maybe you are strongly adjusted to this process, fixed in.
Very close to his question. You spoke about the stages in the Phoenix model, clock. And you started saying 1901 to
many years, 2000, about 50. I don't remember. I don't remember exactly.
But this is the infancy.
Yes.
Right. Which is more than 130, 40 years.
Yes.
Now, can you speak about the duration of the other stages? I mean, if the infancy is 140 years, what is adolescence? Do you have this?
Yes, yes.
And the youth, and then next?
Okay. The problem is that Pluto and Neptune are meeting in conjunction, each time in another point. Each conjunction is 5 or 6 degrees going further in the same thing. So it takes about 30,000 years to complete
30,000.
this great thing. So it's maybe strange to you or to us, but the beginning of the first time meeting of Pluto Neptune in the beginning of the year, great year, it is the first degree of Aries. It was as if it became with the beginning of our present culture, with the birth of Adam. Okay? Then for about 250 years and 2,500 years, to 300 years, the conjunction was in Aries. Then it came to Taurus. And in 1394, when Henry was born, and Renaissance came, and Gutenberg, with his publishing, was born, then it was the first year of Pluto Neptune in Aries, sign of Gemini. So the knowledge became available, and we all here, we are mostly focused on the laws of the consciousness, of the cognition, on language and communication. And we are learning those laws, okay? And we shall continue to study them at least for 2,000 coming years, okay? And then it will be the first time that Pluto and Neptune will meet each other on the point, first time, water sign of Cancer. And then we can find out what emotions, and maybe to bring the Mendeleev's table of emotion elements. So, because of this shift, and that Pluto is elliptic, we have the difference between different phases. In our year, from the beginning, and maybe till 2000 year in future, we have the first hour of Phoenix. It may be between 10 to 30 years.
10 to 30.
I don't know exactly because, I used NASA's tables, but it's approximately. Then the first phase, as you're talking about, it is about 140 years. Then the second phase of crisis, once again, is very short. It might be 15 years.
15 years.
15 to 30, like the first phase.
15.
15 to 30. The next phase, youth was 15 to, and then we have about, again, 15 to 30, the crisis, but then the enlightenment period, when Pluto Neptune 20 degrees, it lasts for about 100 years. And if you remember the age of enlightenment, there was nothing new in paradigms. There were a lot of news in encyclopedias and universities and academies. Okay? It's another principle of life. Okay? And then again we have smaller periods until the end comes.
So it means that the midlife crisis
About
is the
15.
longest.
The longest is the first youth. This is the
And
longest.
youth.
Our childhood, this one, the first phase, it is the longest one.
Yeah, this is 140.
Something
and then
like that.
something. Then it is 15, which is the adolescence, 15 to 30, you said. And then it's another 15 to 30 for youth.
Something like that.
And then it is a long period, 100 years.
100.
And this is the midlife crisis.
No, this is a maturity. This
But
is the
what
fifth
about
phase.
the midlife crisis?
This is also quite short, about
Quite
30
short.
minutes, yes.
Okay. And so the maturity
Is the
in
second
life is
order.
100,
Yes.
which means that in 220, no, 2050,
Olga, let's put it that way. This is very approximate. Because here also I'm doing with the approximate, with the approaches, and I can send you, or maybe in one
Yeah.
of my articles, I believe that one of my articles I have written it.
yeah,
Because from my memory,
yeah.
I shouldn't be so sure that I'm
Yeah.
talking really.
Because if we have such a template,
Mhm.
we can see from the past
Mhm.
and we can predict for the future.
I would like to avoid the word predict. I
Yeah.
would prefer the word to learn. How?
To learn.
Learn.
Lord.
Learning.
Learn.
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 Okay.
How to learn our lessons and to study in the points of bifurcations to make our right choices.
Okay.
To prefer cooperation and not competition.
Yeah.
To prefer joy and not to be, fearful.
Yeah.
That's our mission.
Yeah.
So if we do it today, then there are people, as you know, who do not experience their adolescence or their old age crisis, because if you come to this period with a quite impressive knowledge of yourself, you shouldn't be harmed in those
Yeah.
periods. You can be very expressive in those periods. It is the time of examination, of exam, okay? When you are prepared to exam, then you tell, oh, it was such a challenge, it was so nice. I solved such an interesting, it was a very interesting problem to solve. And the other one said, okay, it was so difficult.
Yeah.
No. It was
Yeah.
time of experience. Like if you are working, if you are learning, studying today in the university, from the beginning you have the plan of your exams. And mostly you can prefer not to go to the lectures. Okay, nobody will tell you anything. But when the time of the first exam comes, if you are prepared, you are well. Not, you are given the second chance. But after second term, with some problems, you are out of the university.
Yeah. What I mean is that if we count in terms of years, calendar years, it will be something like 2200 when if we speak about this prenatal psychology understanding will be in the maturity or the enlightenment period.
There will come new generations
Yeah.
who will gain the knowledge on the collective base. Because it might be quite possible that either John or Troy or you or Sheila already today know perfectly what is correct. But on a collective base, it will take a lot of time when the person will be born who will have the greatest impact on all the humanity. And then we will have Newton's law, or we will have a law of Pythagoras. You know? They will do impact not on their own level, personal, but they will make impact on all the humanity.
Can I share a little bit of an experience? When I first started discussing these things back in the 70s, that mother's experiences are also experienced by the baby, people said, "You're crazy." I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I was told that that's a crazy idea. In 50 years, people talk about it. We saw a television interview yesterday where a man said the same thing. It was amazing. And so by the time of the 2000s, people were saying, of course, what else? There was already, just in that 35, 40 years, an understanding of it. It was amazing.
Yes, indeed, but it is a kind of laws of the cultural development. For example, Faraday, when he discovered his electromagnetic fields, he did not know how to use them. And it took more than 50 years then people understood that it can't be done as a technology. But it took more than 50 years. That's a process. There are processes which take a lot of time in our sense of word of time, duration. So when we accept it, we are not sad about it. We understand that we are part of the process and we should do our work gladly, what is upon to us to do, and to do it.
Yeah, I think you're very right. The thing is that we are working like separate fingers. And if you want the things to happen quicker, we have to make teams. So, for example, in what respects to premonitions, you use the word, premonition, something like that. In the field I work, people always want that because they do not be responsible of making the changes themselves. That's why they want premonitions. And sometimes they give a bad review because you didn't tell them that the guy was going to get engaged to her on the 13th of that such a month at certain hour, and blah, blah, blah. And many times I have to say to the clients, there's free will. And yes, I was checking on Prokofiev right now when you were making your presentation, because as I began doing my own work, I did it with the composers because that's what I knew better. So I said, how does this of rhythms and cycles work? Why do they compose? For example, Beethoven, he had 3 periods. Why was it classic, then classic romantic, and then romantic? Why? So when I saw the changes in their life, and he took the steps, Prokofiev did the same. I was checking. He was born as a communicator. So music was his stuff. But as well, his challenge was communication. And then, when he changed for being a concert pianist, a composer, into orchestra works, he was following, let's say, the intuition of what he heard or whatever, of doing that movement according to the cycle he was living. He died on a day that meant movement. And his biggest challenge was to relationships in those moments. So I was checking, I say, yes, if only we could follow the rhythms, and that happens with any human being. So if the universe, for putting a name, or God or spirit, if the universe is giving you the opportunity to right now move, create, promote, spread. If I would read the rhythms of every one of us right now, maybe I would be amazed that all of us are maybe one. Maybe I would be amazed that we are making communication between all of us, and even of the ones that did not come, like Smil, or Grigory. So it's not to be waiting what's going to happen in 20, in 30, in 200. What the hell? I'm not going to be living until then. It's to know what is happening now. What can we do now? Why to be waiting 50 years? And now the people is speaking about that because they think they are the first ones that had said this, and you were one of the first ones, one of the pioneers. It's like NLP. NLP began many years ago, and now it's like boosting. So it's like this, what we're doing right now, doesn't have to stay here. This, okay, everybody has been spreading, but this has to be like the big step to spread it amongst so many people, to train people to do it, to shorten, quoted, the time, not to be waiting for something to happen. We are people that makes things happen. We are not going to be waiting for something to happen.
May I react in a moment?
What?
May I react a moment?
See,
You see, you said a very important word, responsibility, personal responsibility. When I look at Prokofiev's birth point, BP, he had a lot of challenges in this life because of his previous experiences. In spirit, I don't know. It was his personal responsibility to check it. And it was his mother's responsibility to live upon her times. So, what I would like to tell you, that each person is not born just today. Remember the electrical discharge and then the different waves? So I don't know when and where was the first electrical discharge. I know that everything else can be predicted, like in university. When you are in the university, you know the schedule of your exams. So, but you are responsible, personally responsible. And ineffective method is to blame mother is responsible, father is responsible. No, it's me. And ancient Chinese, had a very important message to us. They said each generation comes to change the habits of their parents, the fault habits of their parents, yes? And in this process, the most important thing is not to blame your parents, because your children should be called to change your mistakes. And this is from generation to generation. And sometimes what we can do in certain times is just to preserve certain knowledge. And there are times when we can go out, and there are times when we should be put inside and to wait. So personal responsibility, and another thing, you said premonition. For me, premonition is my inner knowledge. And what people usually ask is a prediction.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming to somebody, predict me. And they tell, I cannot predict, because it is, you have free will. I can tell you that if you are doing something like criminal activities against life of other peoples, it is not a productive way.
Yes.
But if you love somebody and you live with joy, then you will help yourself. That's a kind of prediction too.
Mm-hmm.
But people live according to their premonitions.
No, I think
And
that
then they stood to exams for their personal responsibility.
yeah, and I think that if we do not like our present, we just have to understand that that our present is the future of our past. And if we are not liking what's going on in the present, then do something, because now you can know how the future can
Do
come.
something what is your calling,
Claro.
your personal.
Claro.
And I should respect your calling as long as you are not intending to kill somebody.
Claro. Yeah, it's true. And when you were saying this, of the music teachers tend to say, if you do not exercise 6 hours per day, you're not going to. It's true. There are many teachers that are that imposing. But even I remember my piano teacher used to say, okay, let's leave here Bach and Bartok and Prokofiev and whatever, and let's give them a rest. Let's focus right now in Mozart. And when you come back to these authors and on Borjak maybe 2 months later, it was like fresh again. I think it's the sensitivity of the people that guides you that you have to be also aware of. And your own sensitivity, I think that there is a moment in life, maybe I'm wrong, but many of us can lose the relationship with ourselves. And then we have to be aware that the first relationship It's not even with our mother. The first relationship is with ourselves.
Indeed, you are correct. And I might add to you something. When Prokofiev was together with other composers, he was playing very hardly and working almost each day. And his wife, second wife, Mira, who was born in Capricorn, she wrote in her diary, which is also published now, Prokofiev was very hardworking. But there were one composer, he was a lazy bones. He didn't come to piano at all. He was lying on his bed, looking at the sky, on the ceiling, and then he was coming to piano when everything was completed. The other name was Shostakovich. You know him, okay? Shostakovich was born in Libra, and he was an Aries sign. So all his work was done inside him, in his mind, and outside you couldn't see that something was going inside. So and Prokofiev, Earth sign, he was all the time playing with his fingers. All his music came through his fingers, through hard work in this world. But Shostakovich, no, he is meditating his mind. When everything is completed, he goes and plays.
Yes.
So the teacher who will tell or told Shostakovich, you are lazy bone, he doesn't understand him. He doesn't see him. That's all. So that's the problem for many educators and teachers to find out whom you are talking about, which tools are most appropriate to such a person, and at which timing.
And they label people since very
And,
young
it's
age.
very complicated. And as I said at the beginning, you are talking about courses. I also like it. It's also burning in me. But people have to be ready. They should be wishing to ask, to come and to learn, because in physics the problem is with reductionism. Everything is made simple. Technological problems are simple. But more difficult problems, we don't know how to solve them at all. It takes a lot of time to work and to learn to love. Because when you have very strong tools, but you don't have enough love and joy in your heart, those tools, as progressive as they might seem, became very harmful in the hands of the people who didn't have love experience, joy of living. Vivre pour vivre. Okay?
I think what you've just done is give us a little preview of Dijan's program tomorrow. We're going to close now. One of the things that we've always suggested to people who have been or doing our workshops is take special note of any dreams that you have tonight, because our whole selves often communicate some very interesting thoughts, and we invite you to share them tomorrow morning when we come together. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
There was a news item